Morning, everyone. I'm Sue Schmidt. Thank you for coming. This is Nestor Gomez, and he's going to introduce himself in just a second. I have a clipboard right here that has a little piece of paper on it that says if you would like to have information about the activities of Teller's Bridge, please give me your name and your email address, and I will put you on our mailing list. If you don't, no harm. It's okay. I understand I get way too many emails as well. But if you'd like to know, this is this. And I hope you'll have a great day, and thank you so much for showing up.
You thought you were going to be far away from the class, right? From the class as well. We don't really need to be like what's in this side. See, I don't have a microphone, you don't want to explain. I was about 8 years old, and I was intended to do two things. There were two things that I wanted to do really badly. Number one, I wanted to make my father proud. Number two, I wanted to have money. Now, having money was difficult because we live in Guatemala. We were a really poor family. We barely made any money. So it was difficult for me to acquire any money. It was difficult also to make my father proud because my father had a really bad temper. And whenever I did something wrong, he got so mad that it made me feel like he hated me, like he was ashamed of me, like he didn't want me. And the fact that I stuttered as a kid made my father upset, extremely upset. Every time that I stuttered, my father felt like it was a fault of his instead of being a fault of mine. It felt like I was embarrassing with my stuttering. I wanted to make my father proud. I was only 8 years old, and I saw my uncle who had come to visit my parents as he often did, and I was so excited because every time that my uncle came to the house before he left, he gave me money. He gave me, not a lot of money, he gave me a couple of coins, but it was enough to go to the store and buy some chips, and buy a soda, and buy a little cake for myself. I wanted to get some money from my uncle before he left, so I was walking around in the patio, pretending that I was playing with a soccer ball, just so my uncle could see me, and he could call my name before he left, and I kept playing with the soccer ball, and trying to get my uncle to see me as I was playing with the soccer ball, and my uncle was talking to my dad, and he was standing by the door, about to get off his motorcycle, about to leave. So I took off running to talk to my uncle, and I went to the front of the house, and I stood there, and I look at my uncle, and I look at my dad, and I look at my uncle, and my uncle is like, "Hey buddy, what can I do for you?" I wanted to tell him that I wanted some money before he left, but I didn't want to stutter in front of my dad because that would make my father so upset. I didn't want my father to be upset at me. I want my father to be proud of me, but I also wanted money so I could go to the store. So I look at my uncle, and before I knew what happened, I heard myself say, "Before you leave, can you give me some money?" I don't know who was more surprised. Me, that I spoke without stuttering, my uncle, or my dad. But my uncle looked at me with a huge smile on his face. He reached into his pocket, he took out his hand, and he went like, "Oh, I didn't bring any change, buddy. Next time I'll give you some money." He gave me a high five, I gave him a high five, he started his motorcycle, he took off, and as he left, he waved at me with a big smile on his face. I know that he was proud of me because I had spoken. I looked at myself, feeling like I was big, like I was making my father proud. I look at my father, expecting my father to be smiling. My father was not smiling. My father was angry. My father was looking at me like a wolf looks at a rabbit in the middle of the forest. "How can you embarrass me that way?" my father said. "Asking for money as if you were a beggar. Asking for money as if I don't give you enough. You are making me ashamed." I wanted to explain to my dad that I wanted money from my uncle because he always gave me money. I wanted to tell him that I was trying to make him proud. I wanted to tell him that my uncle was feeling proud. I tried to talk, but my tongue got stuck. I tried to explain and I started stuttering, and that made my father even madder. He took out his belt and he started to whip me with the belt. I wanted to run away from my father, but that would only make him madder. And I was so afraid that I couldn't move. My tongue and my legs were frozen in place. I lost count of how many times my father hit me. The next time that my uncle came to the house, I no longer played with a soccer ball, hoping that my uncle would see me. Instead, I went to a little room and I hid in the room so my uncle wouldn't see me. So I wouldn't be tempted to talk to my uncle. As I grew older, as I got older, I kept being afraid of talking. As I became an adult, I was even more afraid. By the time I was 40 years old, I had many fears. I had the fear of talking to people because of my stutter. I also had the fear of the dark. I was terribly afraid of the dark. I was also afraid of heights because, obviously. But as I was about to turn 40 years old, I decided that I needed to get rid of all my fears. I had been living with fear my whole life, and all these fears made me an angry person because I felt like a loser. Because I was ashamed of myself. I was so angry that I started to have the temper that my father had. I started to be a reflection of my father. I didn't want to be like that anymore by the time I turned 40 years old. Plus, it was really difficult to be like that. Whenever I had a date and I managed to get a girl to come over the house and I tried to keep the light on, she would ask me to turn the lights off and I'll be like, I want to see your beautiful naked body next to mine. And when she asked me to turn off the light, I would be like, help me! Because I was still afraid of the dark. So I decided one day I had to get rid of all these fears. So I locked myself in a room. I turned off all the lights, I closed all the doors and the windows, and I was so afraid of the dark that I sat in the middle of the room and I was shaking and trembling, and I decided I'm going to close my eyes so I don't see the dark, which was not a good idea because it got darker. And I sat there for a while, I was trembling, and I opened my eyes, and my eyes got adjusted to the dark, and I started to walk around the room in the dark until I was sure that I could walk around the room without being too afraid of the dark. To get rid of my fear of heights, I decided to get on a plane and jump out of the plane. So I got on a plane, I opened the door, and I jumped out of the plane. But I didn't go on any commercial plane, and I opened it like, Cowabunga! I was skydiving. And it was scary. When I first jumped out of the plane and I was free falling, I was screaming, I was so afraid, but as soon as they opened the chute and I started to fly and slowly come down, and I felt like I had wings for the first time in my life, and I was looking at everything, and I was taking on the views, and that's how I conquered my fear of heights. So I decided that if I had locked myself in a room to get over my fear of the dark, and if I had jumped out of a plane to get over my fear of the heights, the best thing for me to do to get over my fear of public speaking is go to a storytelling event, put my name in the hat, and tell a story. So that's what I did. I went to the storytelling event, I signed up my name, and I waited in the room as they started to call out names. Suddenly I felt afraid that they were going to call my name. The room started to get darker. In my head, the room got darker and darker, and I wanted to run away before they called my name. I wanted to go out on the safety of the streets where there was light, where people were not going to know who I was, where I was not going to make anybody ashamed. But they called my name, and I got up on the stage. And to tell you the truth, when I got on the stage, it felt like I was going to jump out of the plane. It felt scary, but I took the jump. I told my story. When I finished my story, I didn't even hear the clapping of the people. I didn't hear nothing. What I heard is myself saying, run away! And I ran to the washroom because I was shaking and I was trembling. I couldn't believe that I had told a story for 6 minutes in front of people. I hadn't stuttered, I had talked, I had been on a stage. I was so happy that I started crying. And I went to the sink to wash my face. And as I'm washing my face, I looked up and I saw myself in the mirror. But I didn't see the 40-year-old man that was trying to get over his fears. I saw the 8-year-old boy. The year-old boy that was trying to make his father proud. The 8-year-old boy that had once found his voice and lost his voice. The 8-year-old boy that had been afraid for so many years. I saw the little boy and I told him the word that he had been waiting his whole life to hear. I love you, and I am so proud of you. Thank you. So my name is Nestor Gomez. I'm now a storyteller. When I came to this country, I was undocumented. I stuttered. And I didn't know the language. It took me many years to overcome my fears and to become a storyteller. Now I have close to 100 mob slams. I have my own storytelling show where I give a platform to other people to find their voices. The biggest blessing of my life. I mean, it's nice to win a lot of mods, but to have a show where I bring other people who have never told a story and coach them and tell them and teach them how to tell a story and see them on stage for the first time sharing their stories, there is no prize bigger than that. And I'm here now to give you a little bit of that coaching, to show you a little bit of how to do stories. So when we first talked about this workshop, it was going to be a workshop about how to tell difficult stories. How many of those people, how many of you here signed up for that workshop? 1, 2, 3, okay. How many of you signed up not knowing what this workshop was going to be? Did you sign up? Workshop? Sign up. Good idea. There's going to be another, you're doing a workshop later today, right?
Yeah, 1 o'clock.
Is your workshop going to be about how to tell stories from the beginning? Like
It's going to be exercises so everybody can learn how to construct stories.
all right. So since you're going to have an opportunity to do that later on, what do you say we concentrate on how to tell difficult stories? Yeah? Yes? Okay, can anybody first of all tell me what makes a story difficult to tell? What is a difficult story?
Something you don't want to talk about.
Okay, okay.
It can be controversial subject matter.
Something that you worry will be so disturbing to the audience it might cause harm.
Painful.
Painful. I saw your hand up earlier.
A lot of emotions.
A lot of emotion. Okay. Now, how many of you would think that the story I just told is a difficult story to tell? Now, the thing about difficult stories is that you get to decide what story is difficult to tell. Nobody else gets to decide for you what is a difficult story to tell. I have told right now easily over 300 stories. And there are a few stories that I have not even begin to write or to talk about because it will be too difficult for me to talk about. And I have talked about being sexually abused as a kid. I have talked about being undocumented. I have talked about my father's anger. I have talked about issues with my family. I have talked about drugs. I have talked about race. I have talked about so many things. And there's few things that to this day I'm like, yeah, I'm not ready to talk about that. So you get to decide what is a difficult story. Nobody else gets to decide for you. Now, when do you know you're going to talk about something? When do you think you're ready to talk about something? Anybody has an idea how to know when you're ready for it? Yes.
When you can get through it without bringing up the emotion.
Will you say that I brought out the emotion as I told the story right now?
Yeah.
And I had told a story right now, 3 times. It's a new story. I consider that by telling a story, you put yourself on the spot, you put yourself back into the place, so it's very difficult not to bring up the emotion. I would say maybe you are hoping that the emotion doesn't overtake you, that I'm not going to start crying to the point where I won't be able to continue the story. And you also get to decide when you're ready to tell the story. Again, nobody gets to decide for you. When I first told my first story, I told a story about coming to this country for the first time. And to be honest with you, at that time, I didn't know that it was an immigration story. Because it's just something that happened to me, and I'm going to talk about this, and I think it's funny. And it was a funny story about me, because I'm from Guatemala. I'm meeting a group of kids from Mexico, and speaking to them in Guatemalan Spanish. I say to them, vamos a chingar la pita, which to me is something like, let's go have fun. To a Mexican kid, vamos a chingar la pita is like saying, let's go fuck some bitches. So it was a very different meaning. I didn't know that. But that story, it wasn't difficult to tell because it was a funny story, then there's some more confusion. But the point is I didn't realize that it was an immigration story. Later on in life, I realized I was telling a lot of immigration stories. But at that time, it was my first story. It was a good story to tell. It was funny. It worked out. I got over my fear of public speaking. I did what I had to do. Now, my idea about that story was that I was going to go to the event, tell a story, and never again in my life tell a story. Because I have never jumped from a plane again, because it was fun, it was nice, but I don't want to die. And I have never locked myself in a room again, well, unless my wife is mad at me and then I just go into a room and pretend I'm here. But I don't need to do those things again. So when I told my first story, I was like, oh, I did it, it's done, never again. I marked it off my to-do list, done. But right after I told my story, they told me, hey, you won the slam. So I was like, great, what the hell does that mean? And they say, well, you won the slam, so now we're going to put your name aside, and you're going to come back and tell with 10 other winners for the competition of Chicago. And we're like, no, thank you. And they told me, think about it. So I went home, I talked to my wife, and she's like, well, think about it. So I started thinking about it, and I sat down and I go, let me see if I can have more stories inside me. And I started writing, and I started writing, and I started writing, and I wrote a story about being sexually abused as a kid. And let me tell you, I wrote the story, and as I was writing the story, I started to cry. And I was shaking as I wrote the story, and I took my laptop because I typed the story on my laptop, and I took my laptop and I told my wife, I need you to hear the story. And I couldn't get to the story without crying. I just like told her a paragraph and I cried, told her another paragraph and I cried throughout the whole story. And by the end of the story, I was shaking so badly that she hugged me, just to make sure that I was okay. And she said, maybe you're not ready to tell the story yet. And I look at her and say, well, I just told you the story. And I know that it took a lot of emotion from me, it took a lot from me, that I'm still shaking, but I told it to you. And I know that if I don't tell it next, I will never tell it again. So I looked on the event for the storytelling show, and the next show that they had, the theme for the show was taboo. And I'm like, damn, it fits the theme. Because it was about something taboo, something that had happened to me that nobody talks about, something that I hadn't talked about. And I went to the event and I told my story. And it was not a funny story to tell. It was a very serious story from beginning to end. There were no laughing, there were no jokes. Like on the previous story that everybody was laughing, everybody was having a fun. It was a very difficult story to tell. But I told a story. I knew that I was ready after I spoke to my wife, after I told a story to my wife. I knew that if I didn't get up and told a story, I wasn't going to tell it. So because at the time of my life I was pushing myself to do things, I pushed myself to tell the story. And to me, it helped me a lot. It helped me to overcome a little bit of all the resentment and the hate and anger and shame that I had from that event. And it helped me to be able to talk about so many other things. Once I was able to talk about this, that I hadn't talked to anybody, I could tell you anything. I could tell you about, hey, I used to get high and use cocaine. You know, I got married, I got divorced, I got married, I got divorced. To me, talking about all the other things, it freed me so much. But again, that is completely up to you. If I have written the story and my wife had told me, oh, you have to tell the story next, you have to. And I had forced myself without knowing inside me that I was ready, maybe I would have never told a story after that. Because I have felt so hurt by telling my own story. So what I'm trying to say is, like, again, it's up to you to decide what story is difficult. It's up to you to decide when do you tell your story. There might be a theme, there might be an event, but it's completely up to you to decide when to tell the story. How to tell the story. Yes, that is, maybe it's even harder than writing, and it's even harder to decide when you're going to tell it, because knowing how to tell it without the emotion overcoming you. I tell stories, even this story, when I told it the first time, which was a couple of weeks ago, I felt the emotion in me at the end when I look at the little kid, and I could hear my voice cracking as I was telling him. So what I usually do when I feel emotions overcoming or getting too difficult, I stop. I stop, and I take a moment, I take a pause, I relax myself to make sure that I'm ready to take the next step. Another thing that helps me a lot about telling difficult stories is being able to talk about something from different points of view. And what do I mean by that? The story that about that issue that happened to me when I was a kid, the very first time that I told it, well, let me tell you the story. Do I remember the story? I haven't told it in a long time. In the 1980s, Guatemala, the country where I was born, was in the middle of a civil war. A lot of people were getting killed by the army and the guerrilla. There were so many people getting killed that my parents decided that the only way for us to have a life was to come to the United States in search of freedom. So my parents came to the United States and left us in the care of our uncles and grandparents. I was a little kid when I left, and they came to the United States. It took them a lot of years to be able to put enough money together to bring me and my family to the United States and be reunited with them. We started a life of relative peace and prosperity. Fast forward a couple of years. I was already married, and I was raising my own family, my wife and my 2 little kids, when suddenly the phone rang in the middle of the night. I answered the phone, and I heard the cries of my mother. Turns out that her brother, my uncle, had recently been killed in Guatemala. You see, my uncle was part of a group of people that, having not enough money to buy a house, got together and decided to take over some government land. And they started to build the houses, and they refused to leave until the government agreed to sell them the land at a very cheap price. After years of negotiation, the government finally agreed to give all these people the land almost for free. But the night before they were to sign the agreement, the leaders of the group were all kidnapped, taken to the woods, tortured, and executed. My uncle was among those people that got killed. My mother had heard about this, and she needed me to make the arrangement for her to fly back to Guatemala. Because this is before the internet, so you had to call, and my mother couldn't speak proper English, and she needed me to call the airline and get the tickets for her so she could fly back to Guatemala and bury her brother. I agreed to help my mother, and I hung up the phone. But as soon as I hung up, the feelings overtook me. And trembling and crying, I huddled in the corner of a room. My wife, who had woken up with all the noise and commotion, and I was listening, tried to help me. But I screamed at her. You don't understand. You don't understand. I killed him. I killed him. You see, unknown to my wife up to the moment, for years, I had secretly hoped, I had secretly wished, I had secretly prayed that my uncle made an end as horrible and terrifying, as painful as the one he did, because in my mind, that was the only fair price for the sexual abuse that he inflicted on me. I told all of this to my wife, and I asked her to please don't tell anything to my mom. Her brother had just died. She already has too much shit on her plate. My wife promised that she wasn't going to say anything. And then I asked my wife to please do me a favor, because I knew that I couldn't get myself to talk to my mom the next day. So I asked her to please make the phone call, arrange the ticket for her, because I knew that I couldn't do it. It wasn't in my heart to do it. I knew I couldn't do it. So my wife agreed to do it, and the next day I went to work. When I came back from work, I went to see my mother. My wife was there. And she met me outside the apartment, and she told me, I told your mother everything that happened. You see, your sister was in there, and your mom was arguing with her because your sister didn't want to help, and your mom started to argue, and they started to get into a really big fight. So in order to stop them from fighting, I told your mother everything that happened, so they would not talk about that, and she would think about something else. I looked at my wife, and I went inside the room to talk to my mother. But as I went to talk to my mother, I spoke to my sister first, and that's when I learned that my sister had her own history of sexual abuse. You see, when we were living in Guatemala under the care of my grandparents and uncles, my uncle never abused my sister. But my grandfather used to go to the bed of my sister and cuddle her in by putting his hands in places where he shouldn't have. When I finally went to talk to my mother, she looked at me and she got down to her knees and she begged for forgiveness. Perdóname, perdóname, she kept saying to me. I hugged my mother and lifted her off the floor, and I told her that she had nothing to be sorry for because it hadn't been her fault. She had come here to provide us with life and freedom. She didn't know what was going on in Guatemala. And after that, I went to talk to my sister to talk about the horrible thing that happened to us during our shower. Together, through our pain and tears, we spoke about everything that had happened to us. Together, through our pain and tears, we confronted the pain and the anger that we have been hiding all these years. Together, we took our first steps toward freedom. Thank you. So that was the story that I told. I'm very emotional. It's the first time that I told it was like, I was just standing there like a rock. Because I had just started telling stories, and it was a very difficult story to tell. I told the story from a very, what I like to call it, political view. Because I take that Civil War of Guatemala, I take the immigration issue, I compound them into this is what happened, and this is what we had to live, and this is the moment that happened. Now, that is one point of view of what happened. I have come to the story from different points of view as well. I told a story, a different story about wanting to go to, I'm not going to tell you the whole story, I'm just going to make a summary of the story. I told a story about going to a sunflower field for the first time in my life because it's my birthday. I'm going to the sunflower field, and my wife is like, "Are you sure you want to go there?" I'm like, "All my friends are always taking pictures of sunflower fields. I want to go check it out, so let's go." So we go there, and when we get to the sunflower field, I cannot move as I see the sunflowers because the abuse that I was a victim of happened in a sunflower field. And my wife knows that every time that I see a sunflower, I hate the sunflowers, and for years, every time that I see the sunflowers, I break them, I cut them, I kick them, I destroy the sunflowers because I hate them so much. But I had come to the realization that I cannot live with that anger inside me for so long. And that's why, in spite of my pain, I want to go to the sunflower field. But I cannot walk, I cannot move, and I ask my wife to please hold my hand. And she does. And I take my steps into the sunflower field, and I go to the middle of the sunflower field, and I take a picture, and I post it on my Facebook page. And after I take the picture and post it on my Facebook page, she asks me, "What do you want to do now?" And I tell her, "I want to buy some sunflowers so we could take them home." And I buy the sunflowers that for years didn't show me the light, because I used to love sunflowers because as a kid I could see how they moved to see the sun, and they were showing me a sign of life and prosperity and hope. But after that event, they didn't show me that anymore. So I want to feel that again. And I take the sunflowers with me to the house, and the sunflowers dry up, and I still have the bouquet of dry sunflowers in my house. But now when I see them, again, they are showing me a path to the light. So that's basically a story about what happened to me, but it's from a completely perspective. It's me now as an adult, and me wanting to finally overcome all the hate that I'm feeling inside me and seeing the light again. So you don't have to come to your story from, "This is what happened to me, and this is what I want to talk about," or "This is the typical thing that I want to talk about, and this is how I have to talk about this step by step." You could look at the thing that happened to you and completely see it from a different point of view. Separate yourself from that issue and see what other perspective you can see. Perspective as a person, as a family member, as a kid, as getting over that, as hoping that no other people have to go through that. That's another reason why it's a good thing. And this is probably the best reason for me as a person, as an individual. I feel like I don't tell you these stories because I'm like, "Oh, poor guy, oh, all the things that happened." I'm not looking for your, what's the word? Yeah, I'm not looking for your sympathy or your pity. I told these stories because the first time that I told the typical story that I shared with you earlier, somebody in the audience came up to me and told me, "My brother was abused as a kid. And he just told me a week ago. And now I understand why he never wants to play with my kids. How do I help him?" And I'm like, I'm not a doctor, I'm not like a psychology major or anything, but I have an idea of everything that I went through. So what I told her was, "Love your brother. Let him know that you're there for him, and understand that he has fears, and he's not that he doesn't love you kids, he's so afraid to hurt them because he was hurt as a kid. So he's so afraid to hurt them that it takes a while for him to show love to your kids. Meet him at the place where he is at, and just let him know that you love him." So to me, the point that I share these stories, or the point where we should share these stories, is because we need to remember that there are people in the room that might be having a real difficult time with something similar. Or with another issue that might not be the same issue, but it could be something related to it. And maybe, yes, maybe, your story is the anchor that they need in order to pull themselves from drowning. Maybe your story is a life-saving device that is going to help them come out from the nightmare that they live in. I don't tell my stories because, I want to win another slam. I mean, it's nice to win, I'm not going to deny it. But I tell these stories with a purpose to finally, hopefully, guide somebody through the light that I was able to find. So, I hope that when you tell a difficult story, when you finally manage to tell a difficult story, you come to this with that set of mind. It's not like, oh, I'm gonna write a story because I wanna be the one that's telling the best story. Be the best story in the room is very relative. I might love a story that Corey told, but everybody else might think that it was not good at all, which is usually the case. But no, just kidding.
Wait, what?
No, he's an amazing storyteller of his own. But I might have an idea that one of his stories is my favorite. And Stephanie might be like, yeah, I really don't connect with the story. This one, the story is my favorite. My point is that the best reason to tell the stories is so other people might be able to help themselves or to find a way to overcome whatever is painful to them. Yeah. We don't have a lot of time. We have like 5 more minutes. So I want to leave the room open. Is there any questions, any comments that anybody has? Comments, questions? Yes.
So the story of your sexual abuse, you kind of talked about 2 different entry points.
Yes.
How did you, were there more? I mean, does it feel like there's a lot of different ways that you turned it around and thought about telling it?
Yeah.
Or are these 2 really
Well, I write a lot of stories. I just write so many stories. I also talk about my lack of relationship with my daughter, which is another story that I tell. I come from that from different perspectives, from different points. I come from that from teaching her to speak Spanish since she was a little kid. And then she teaching me songs in English as a kid that grew up in Guatemala, the Itsy Bitsy Spider. And she came home and Itsy Bitsy Spider. I'm like, what the heck is that? I didn't know. So now she's teaching me English. And then I'm teaching her things. And then she's teaching me. And then she grows up to be a teenager. And then we get into a big argument. And now it's been 20 years that she hasn't talked to me. So the only language that we have is silence. So I came through that through silence. I also come through the same story by my relationship with my dad. How I was always trying to make my father proud, and how I wanted my daughter to be proud of me, and then suddenly she's no longer proud of me, she's mad at me. And now we're not talking the same way that me and my father didn't have a relationship. So, because I write a lot, it's easier for me maybe to look at this from a different perspective, or to start writing a story and be like, okay, so I already, what I don't want to do is okay, so I already spoke about my abuse one time, I don't want to talk about that anymore. For me, it's let me find a different way to talk about this. It's like you listen to a song that it's a country song, and then all of a sudden, I Will Always Love You, the Dolly Parton wrote, and then Whitney Houston took it, and it was a different, same song, but with a completely different beat. So that's what I try to do with stories. I take the same concept, and I put a different beat to it. Let's see what this beat does to the same story, and it's molded in a different way. It's still the same message, but it's a different thing. Does that help? Yes.
Forgive me, I was out of the room just a minute, Nestor, but I have a question about, there's this adage about telling a story from a scar, not a wound. And since you talk about some things that are deeply personal,
yes,
do you find that there are times when you just start off and have to leave it, or come at it?
Yes, but I do that when I'm writing the story. For me, once I read the story, yes, it's going to take me a while to decide when I'm going to tell it. But writing the story for me is the most difficult thing, because writing the story is when I'm putting everything in there. It's like I'm cooking something. I'm cutting the onions, I'm cutting the green peppers, I'm putting everything on the pot, I'm cooking it, I finish it, I put the plate there. Do I eat it by myself, or do I invite other people to come and have it? So for me, the cooking of it, the writing of it is the difficult. Is where I decide if for some reason I don't feel happy with it, or it's burned. Toss it away.
So when you stand up to deliver the story, you're past the part where you might be overwhelmed with the emotion.
Not bad, because once you tell it, because you put yourself in the vulnerable place where you basically go back to the place. I do also practice the stories. So practicing the stories helps to see, okay, maybe I'm not ready to tell it. I'm gonna wait a little bit longer. But once I'm like, I'm gonna tell it, and if I do feel like I'm getting too emotional, I stop, take some time, breathe. Because as I'm telling the story, you have no idea when there's a break on the story. Or I might tell the story, and guess what? I'm not ready to say that. I'm just gonna take it out. Because do you know what the story is about? Do you know what the story was about, the sunflowers, or the other story that I told, or the story about me and my dad? I could have taken out the part about a girl coming over and wanted me to turn off the lights. I could have taken the whole part out, and you would have never known. So if I'm not ready to say that, even when I'm on stage, I'm like, guess what? I'm not gonna say it. I'm gonna take that part off and go over here where I feel a little bit safe. So maybe next time, after I told this a slightly different version, maybe I'll make a more profound version. So that also helps, to like edit yourself. Because it's part of when you tell it, how much are you gonna tell it, and how are you gonna tell it. Yes?
Have you ever told a story without writing it out first? And just raw?
Yes. Yes. There's a story on the More Radio Hour about me driving a crazy Uber lady. I was going to tell a story at a slam, and I usually practice with stories with my wife, or I used to, because now she's like, another story. So I told her, like, hey, I have a story ready. She was gonna come with me to the slam, and I say, you wanna hear the story? She's like, okay. I told her the story, and she's like, do not put your name in the hat tonight. I'm like, what that means? She's like, the story is not ready. So I told her, well, there's something happened about me. I was driving for Uber, and this crazy lady got in the car, and she wanted me to drive her to the train station. She's like, I want to know about that. So like, I haven't read the story yet. And she's like, well, that's a better story. So I told her, like, can you drive? So, well, I think when we go to the slam, I think about the story. She got on the car, and she doesn't like driving, especially in Chicago. And she asked me for the address. I'm like, I'm thinking about the story. Just put it on the GPS. And she's like, oh, I hate the GPS lady. I'm like, GPS lady. That's a character in the story. You know, so I added that to my story. As I'm driving, as she's driving to the slam, I'm thinking of the story. How am I going to tell it? What are the things that I want to tell? How much I want to tell? And I only have 6 minutes, so take this part out, put this. Like, I think about the story. I get there and I tell my wife, if they have too many people already sign up, I'm not going to sign up. If they need people, I'll sign up. They usually get 10 people. I get there, they have 9 names. So I sign up, and I just sit down, and I'm listening to the stories, and I'm thinking about my own story. And then they call me, I get up, and the story just killed. It just came out properly. It doesn't happen all the time, because I had those stories, and then I'm like, it needed more time. Or the ending wasn't there. But nowadays I give myself I allow myself to just play a story on the stage for the first time. So yes, because to me, every story is different. To me, it's not like I don't have a speed process of how I'm going to tell a story. Like, I'm going to write down, I'm going to give myself 20 minutes to write this story. Sometimes I write a story in 5 minutes. Sometimes it takes me 3 years. Sometimes I don't even write it down. Yes. Anybody else? Any other question? Does this workshop help you? Do you think it helped you? Yes. Was it enjoyable? Did you have a good time? Yeah? All right. Do take the workshop with Stephanie, and who else is doing the workshop? Howard. Do take the workshop. I still take workshops because, yeah, I've been telling stories for 10 years, but I'm always like trying to learn new things. When you consider that you have learned enough, then you really don't know anything. I'm always listening to people's stories. I'm listening, I love what he did on the story. There's a young lady in New York that told an amazing story about walking down the street, and she's not able to use pens because she's going through a medical issue, and she likes to use pens, and she's wearing a dress that time, and she's walking on the street, and a guy on the street goes like, hey, where you going? And she turns around and snaps at the guy like, what, just because I'm wearing a dress, you calling me that you shouldn't be doing that? And the guy like, bro, it's me from work. And on the story she says, I thought he was saying, hey, where you going? But he was just saying, hey, where you going? And he blew my mind. It's like the same phrase, but with completely different meanings. And it took me 2 years to write a story, but I started with one phrase, but by the end of the story had a different meaning. But I'm always trying to do that, like learn new things. Somebody did this, let me try to do it. And it might take me a while, but I'm always like looking for new things. So do take on a workshop. These workshops are amazing. And the people giving the workshops are awesome. Thank you so much.